That's a building one of anything. It's here.
I said, yo, me like me up. I want to live be live, but I swear, not easy. I've been rapping my own man, I'm getting the market with doing, I'm breaking the profit. On my way, people calling me names, all the trouble I see, I ain't do at a piece. When they're suffering, those sources, I can't pay the code, only how I get paid. Sooner or later, my hustle pay. Let pay, and I'm rushing myself. Keep it cool, everything have a CC. Too much rushing, I probably chasing. One day. One day. I'll get it cool. One day, my
hustle gonna pay one day. Any mistake gonna see my face. Me pa know and I'm watching it. One day, success gonna come my way. I know my hustle gonna pay one day. Any mistake gonna see my face. Me pa know and I'm watching it. One day, success gonna come my way. Yeah. My mama was so worried. My papa was so worried. My friend was eat your money. Any mess that will come on that miss. So I on my way. 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 I'm on my way to this place and I'm looking for money. Looking for money, oh. Looking for money. I want me mama happy. Want me papa happy. Want me all my brothers and sisters to come around me.
Yeah, Capilico. Why you know you hustle? Why saying the book by the Genesis? Shall come to power, shall come to power. Why I feel be working on Wednesday? In my love for the ma, in my love for the ma. All in the dark, all in the dark, all in the week, all in the week. All in the sun, the
mama was so worried. My papa was so worried. My friend would eat your money. Any mess that will come on that miss. So I on my way. 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 Looking for money. Looking for money.
Armando, you are a famous star now. So what do you have to say to the audience out there?
Okay, well, to the audience out there, I want to say keep focused, believe in your hustle, and one day you're going to pay. And I also want to say a very big thanks to my mom, who always been there for me, in my struggle. Mommy, I love you, and I'm coming back soon.
Looking for money, want me mama happy, want me papa happy, want me all my brothers and sisters to come around me. DJ.
Look at Rescue. Wow. We'll run part of the school graduation part come from inside here.
Oh, yeah, now.
Okay, yeah, thank you very much.
So you see the ingredients now coming to show you mix ingredients. Then what are the ingredients we're talking about? We are talking about the flour, the margarine, put your command there. The flour, I come here taking it from here. That's why I put it parentheses there. The flour, the margarine, baking powder. Baking powder. You have the sugar. You see, Papa, can you see?
Yeah.
Baking powder, sugar. You shouldn't put. What I'm saying here is because sometimes when you are baking, the margarine has salt. Don't go and put salt there. Those are the margarine people are facing in Ghana now, except butter. The butter they sell in the supermarket. The one. Then you can use pinch of salt. Okay?
So, the margarine is different from butter.
Yeah, butter is different. The butter is different. Who has seen butter here before? Good. The butter is in it. They sell it in the mall and you use butter. Some cake that you facing you use butter. Some pastries you use to refer it to butter.
Okay, so we'll be writing on the butter.
Yeah, butter will be ready on margarine. Sometimes people just see the sachet once they say it's butter because they split it. But the real butter is unsalted butter.
Yeah, that
They
one
have
will
it
be
in the mall.
But I want to go premium. Is this what margarine?
It has salt inside. It's a margarine, yes. But
Okay,
it's
everything
butter.
gets salt inside.
Liberian butter, yes. But the unsalted butter, they have the butter pie, which is expensive. I think by this time, it's going
So,
to take
madam.
for one pack.
And I'm working milk. We're not putting the extra.
That different method, yeah.
I told you to put it on it. They didn't say put the metal on it. Come, bring your nose, let me see something. But you have space here. Why you jump? Where's the condos?
The special of the
Where is
notes.
it?
But that's the
Come.
notes. So
Where's the spoon? Where the notes you writing? Let me see your spoon notes.
Yeah, go on, I'm holding it.
If you put the name there,
Yeah,
let's go put it there.
because
Put it there so you can know what you are doing. You know why I'm doing this? I'm doing it to make it easy. So that means when you're measuring the spoon, you will know exactly what to do. When I say mix ingredients, the ingredients has to do with the flour. You're talking about your flour, margarine, baking powder, sugar, nutmeg. You already have the measurement, right?
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Lieutenant Commander J.R. Glapohkpa Chesson talk show. This morning, I'm at the Slater Mill in Pawtucket, Rhode Island. The Slater Mill was the first mill that revolutionized the industry business in the United States of America. Now, this is a old mill. In the 1700s it was built, and this was to alleviate the hardship of slavery. It was supposed to alleviate the hardship of slavery by using the cotton gin and the mills to produce cloth and cotton and whatever they had to do to make the cotton feasible for textile making. So here we are. This was the first mill in the United States of America, in Rhode Island. It was supported by the Brown brothers. And here we are, by one of the Brown brothers. Do your history, and you'll learn more about that. So let's stroll around and see what we got to see around here. Yeah.
join us. And then we were just talking a little bit about how this was the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. And what was I saying?
So it wasn't a planned development. Like, hey, we're gonna start the revolution here.
Yeah.
It just evolved. It's like we happen to have all these craftsmen here now. We
Right.
happen to have the river here.
Right.
You know, you got a choice. You want to stay agrarian, you want to be industrial. It was like, so it was like a flip of a coin. It wasn't like, well, if we want to be industrial, we got to move to where the rivers are and stuff. It was
No,
just,
but they did in New Jersey. That park I used to work at in Patterson.
Yeah.
They actually planned it there. They're like, okay, we're gonna. It was the first planned industrial city, but here a little earlier, it
Uh-huh.
wasn't planned.
Right.
It was like we already have the artisans here. We already have the river. They were already using the river power for things like more like simple machines. Like we're gonna have like a grist mill, something that just harnesses the power as the water comes down. It turns the mechanism and it grinds. Nothing as sophisticated as what comes later. So they're already doing that. And then
so do you
another.
think New Jersey piggybacked off what was happening here because they saw it was effective? And hey, you know what? It can work. Rather, it wasn't a.
Yeah, it was all kind of forming at the same time.
Right.
So I'd have to really look at it closely about like who got it from where. But that was also like 1790. But they took a little while to like have enough investors to actually
Right.
build the roads there.
Right, but here wasn't as big of a risk. The river is right here. Back there, they had to go, look, we're going to plan, you know, move all these people over there. We're going to start this development. Whereas here it was like,
There were already people here using
Yeah.
the river.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. And the other big factor was that there was a wealthy man who wanted to invest his money in this. It was Moses Brown, who was the part of the prominent Brown family. Most of his family, they were trading humans for the slave trade, and he decided he didn't want to do that anymore. He wanted to get out of the slave trade, and he wants to invest his money somewhere else. So he sees that there's this need to have industry in America, and so he's already trying to work with craftspeople in the area and trying to make machines that'll make cotton thread. So making that thread it's harder than you would think at first. But they would have had the big spinning wheel back in the day, right? And they're spinning it, slowly producing the thread. But he wanted to be able to do that faster. The problem was the machines that he was making, the cotton is so delicate and the thread kept breaking. So his machines basically just didn't work. He's already trying to do this, and then the last component comes in that makes this successful, and that's a young man named Sam Slater. He came here from England, and he had the information that they needed. So he grew up in an industrial town. He was apprenticed to a man who had a big factory there, and he used this machine that we'll see inside. It's called an arkwright, and it's the first model where they would take the cotton roving, like the big. I'll show you a picture. I'll show you. We'll see it inside too. But they'll take like the roving, which is like, you know, like slightly processed cotton, but it's still going to break apart, and they would spin it into thread that's tight and strong. So that machine, the arkwright, was able to do that. Nobody here could figure out how to get that to work. And so Sam Slater comes, his training there, he's not supposed to leave England, because those are the secrets of the country, right? And so he's supposed to be staying in England, working in the factory there, you know, he could be a manager. But he sees that, you know, his last name isn't one of the big names in the area. He's never going to be an owner and be the top level. And that's what he wants. So he decides he's going to leave England illegally. And he dresses up as a farmer, gets on a ship, comes to the United States. But he still brings his apprenticeship papers with him to prove who he was. So it wasn't like they were on the ships looking for him either. So he comes here, he lands in New York City, land of opportunity. He's trying to go around, you know, he's a young guy. He's saying, look, I've got the information you need. Like, you can come and I'll tell you how to build this machine. So later on, sometimes he's been credited with having a photographic memory that he remembered every part. But really, it took him a lot of time. The first thing he needed to do was find someone who believed him and trusted him and wanted to get him on board. So Moses Brown up here in Providence, he hears there's this guy going around New York. He's supposed to have this information. So he brings him up here, invites him to come here, and he actually stays his first night in the building behind us, the home of Sylvanus Brown, who was like a distant cousin of Moses Brown. And he was also a craftsperson, so kind of the idea of like, okay, we're going to vet this guy. Who's this guy? What is he saying? Does he really know what he's talking about? So he stays there. The house, though, it's been moved, so it wouldn't have been right in this spot. He comes here. They decide, you know, he seems like he kind of knows what he's doing. So then they work together, and they have craftspeople in the area are helping to make the machine, and Sam Slater is using the information that he had brought from England, and they're trying to test it out. It takes them like a year to get a working, like, you know, version of that arkwright machine that we'll see. And that's when they open their first mill. They open a small mill. It would have been down the river a little bit. It was Sam Slater, and he had about 10 children who would work under him and were working the jobs of creating the thread. So that's the very beginning where it starts. And we're going to walk down along this way, take a look at the canal and the river, and then we'll head in the mill.
Question.
Other things, yeah.
On the paranormal side, is this place haunted?
I have not experienced anything. We're here during the daytime. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, there's people that will maybe talk about that, but I haven't experienced anything.
Okay, thank you.
And were you going to say something?
Yeah, is this dam here, is that original? That 300-400, that's like...
I mean, it's basically,
so the rocks haven't
it was
fallen
made out
apart?
of wood, and, you know, it's been replaced, basically, like, over time. It's kind of like an old building, too. Like, this building that we see, so this is his second mill. I talked about he opened one in 1790. This is 3 years later, 1793. They built something here, but not what you see. This is restored to 1835. A little later, you get that nice bell tower up top, kind of regulating the workers, telling them when to come in. And
Ranger, could you state your name again, please?
Julia.
Thank you.
We'll just take 1 second to peek around, take a look at the river, and then we'll go out. We don't want to be in the sun right now. Okay. Yeah, so there you can see there's the dam that's stopping the water from flowing down so quickly. Not currently, but it could be used raised up so the water wouldn't come down the river, and it would come down, see this area behind you here. And so that allowed the water to come under the building, and there's a big water wheel there that would turn. The water wheel was 8 tons, very heavy, and that's how they would first harness the energy, and then they would go to the machines on the inside. So we'll head inside, and let's see, we need to put on a map. Do you need a map?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Entering Slater Mill. Thank you.
I'm just going to close this behind you. So on the wall here is a picture, a painting of Sam Slater. So he's the English gentleman who came here and was successful. And really, his success, sometimes people credit him with he created this machine, like he's a genius, he changed America, which there's some truth in it, but really there are a lot of people in the same period who have this information, so if it wasn't him, it probably would have been someone else to come over. And I think what's really significant about him is he kind of just had all the pieces, and he was able to run a successful business. And that's why he was so successful. here, and then later on he opened a mill town called Slater's, of course, named it after himself. And just that he was able to have that business sense was why he was so successful. So we can walk in this way. And the first thing, this is a little bit later, you might recognize these sort of images, but you can just imagine this room filled with machinery. We were discussing it earlier, imagine this room being really, really loud because there's all these machines going and there's cotton, all this cotton fiber just kind of flowing through the air. So it would have been, for the people working here, what do you think, not maybe the easiest place to work, but it was also a stable job where they could come here and get paid. So that was something really new for the United States because most people up until this time, we have farmers, we have craftspeople, well, they're all getting paid for what they produce, right? Like if you're a farmer, you get paid for the crops. If you're a carpenter, you're getting paid for the chair, not the time it took to produce the chair or to grow the crops. And so here, this is the first time that it really changes the way that Americans lived. So one of the reasons that this building is so significant, the Industrial Revolution is so significant, because it changed how people lived and people's relationship to work. So now you're coming in, you're getting paid. In this case, then you have someone who's on top telling you what to do, what hours to work. Of course, that results in protests as well. But let's take a look through here at what we have. So you recognize, of course, cotton. So the cotton would have been grown in, okay, you can hold it, in 1790, in that period, it would have been grown in the Caribbean and in South America, mostly in French Guiana. It would be picked by enslaved people in those areas. And then later on, it would have been in the American South, especially in Georgia. So first they're getting cotton, it's coming up here. You can see like how there's seeds in it and everything. You can see especially here, just a lot of seeds that come from cotton. So they would have run it through, before it came here, through cotton gin to separate the seeds. And the purpose there is so that...
This is the cotton gin.
This is the cotton gin, yeah. I can show you. So if you take a nice clump of cotton, right, with the seeds, it goes in this side, turn it this way, and it's bringing it through, and it's picking the seeds out on that side. And then on this side, it comes out cleaner. So mostly, this is just to show you what this process would have been like. It mostly wasn't happening here. And the reason, because if you're buying cotton by weight, you don't want to pay for seeds. So you pay for the cotton like this. It used to come up here in bags, but then later on it would come in big bales like this. With this giant thing of cotton, you stick it in the bale breaker here, and this would break it up. And this machine, I think, is useful that you can see. So you can see the big wheel on the side. And just imagine that there's now these belts going up to the ceiling, drive shafts up there, so that the power coming into the building is coming from the water wheel below us, and it's then powering these machines.
So this is what electrified the place?
Yes, they use the water power. So it's the drop in the water in the river. The water, there's a giant water wheel underneath us that you can't see, but just imagine that water wheel is going around, and that's how we have power in the building. So it's going to use the bale breaker and then everything else here. So the next one, so here we have, you recognize what this is?
Yeah. So it's funny, because touching this reminds me of something as a kid, and I'm trying to think, was it a mattress that I slept on? Was it, because again, this was New Bedford, my grandfather was a room fixer, so I don't know if he brought this stuff home, but this feels exactly like it did. Exactly.
Yeah, it's like that sensory memory.
Yeah.
Right? Like you can't quite
But it's a
place it.
feeling that you don't, it's a very unique feel too. It's kind of like maybe sheep's wool, but...
Right, it's a little bit like that. Yeah.
Wow. All right.
I don't know, yeah. Yeah, but they would have been that period where they get like these giant bales, maybe. Who knows?
No, it feels like
It's
that.
like that,
This is
like,
too soft.
Right, because this has been kind of separated and fluffed. versus that's like the...
Wow.
Yeah. So over here, this machine, this was our carding machine. So previously you do it by hand like this, right? You have to brush it so all the fibers go the same way. So it's sort of like brushing your hair. So now it's all in one direction. But doing it with the brushes, of course, it takes a lot longer. So here, the carding machine, it has the brush inside, you can see. Yeah. And if you look inside, you can see that there's a brush on the other side. So like instead of doing it by hand, now you just turn on, the water power is going, and this will run. It will part your cotton for you. And this is one of the machines that another craftsman from the area, the Wilkinson, he helped to create this. His mill is the stone one across the way. So he was another major factor. So just to show that it really was a kind of a community effort to have these machines up there. And then this one over here is the famous one. It's the first replica. All of these are replicas. But this is the arc breaker. So you see here, there's this is what's called the roving, that thicker cotton. It's not quite thread yet. It's coming through the rollers here, so it's rolling the fiber through. It's getting thinner and thinner. And then what we'll see on the other side, on a machine that works, is that this fiber will come down, attached here, and you can see once it's gone through the rollers, it will have thinned out. So this isn't showing you accurately how that would be, but just if you can imagine that coming through. And this was the job, you see the size of the machine, for children. It's on a smaller scale. It was when Sam Slater first opened. It was really him and children working for him. Later on, he hires women and then men, but in the beginning, just children. And, you know, in the area, for context, all the children would have been working. They would have been working maybe in a parent's shop or helping around the house. The difference here is now they're getting paid to go somewhere else to work and getting a paycheck. In the beginning, though, the families had a little bit more say in how their children worked because it was a really small group. They had the whole community here. The mill owner didn't always have a private say, and so sometimes they would complain and say, you know, I don't want my children working such long hours, or I don't want, you know, you haven't paid my children in however long, and or I'm not sending my children back to work until you pay us. So they had a little bit more say versus later on in the factory where they basically just had to do exactly as they were told. So that would have been all the case here in the early period of 1790s. And now I wanted to just give you a chance to look down this way. This is my favorite spot in the building. You can just really get the sense of what makes this place so special, that we're right over the Blackstone River. They have a dam. You can look through here too. Right over the Blackstone River, harnessing the power of that river outside. And if you notice too, that what you're looking through the windows, you notice their size. They're so large, so they're letting in all the light too. So you can have people working inside, and even on dreary days, we can pretty much. Any thoughts, questions you have coming up?
So this is tiny compared to the ones up in Lowell and
Oh yeah.
So, but this was also when it began, and this is pretty interesting that I didn't think about the machines actually made for children's sizes. I know the children work, and I know they also were responsible for cleaning up all the dust, and the machines didn't stop. If they caught their arm in or their hair got caught in, they were going through the machine.
Right, and in the early period, this was a little bit more simple work because they were making the thread versus weaving on the loom. So they used more children. It's later on that young children started to do less useful in the mills, and that's when they were doing the sweeping and they're employing more women. So we'll walk down the
all these
everything here, there's some machines that are original, but a lot of them, they're not things that were necessarily yesterday we had a festival where I met this gentleman, and it was for the first strike of wage-earning workers in the United States, and it was here in 1824. And so that's what this is about. But it's actually quite interesting because it's just, this is the beginning of that factory system where you come into work, you work a certain number of hours, you get paid for your time. So it's really not surprising that first strike of people who earn a wage is here. This is the first place that's really happening on a larger scale. And so we don't remember the name, or it's not recorded, the names of the people who went on strike, but it was a group of women leaders. So they would have been young, like late teens, maybe early 20s. The owners wasn't just Slater, it was everybody in the area. They were making less money, so they cut their pay. They took less time and they had to work longer. So they protested this, along with the support of the community. So one of the reasons that could happen here was because there was craftspeople in the area who would support the mill workers, and so together they are supported through this time. It's only about a week. They go back to work, the women, but we don't really know. We don't have the document of what was actually decided, of if they won what their claims were, but they did go back to work. It's not like later periods where they have strike breakers come in and work, and maybe people lose their job and have to come back and accept the lower wages. But because this was the first place with that factory system, it's also the first place that so we'll come over this way. This is the one that does still work. And this kind of machine would have been used in this building. And you can imagine so many of these going down the length of the building. Very loud and noise. And it's going to do the same thing as the artery. So if you can see, it's a little clearer here. So we have our cotton roving here, coming down. Only one of them is set up currently. It's actually quite difficult to do this when I was working on it. By the time you fix one, then you break the one next to it. But this one will work. So it brings the important pieces that it takes two pieces, right? Because if you wanted to have a strong cotton thread, it needs to be twisted together, and that's what gives it strength. The two pieces come in, the roller kind of smooths them out, thins them out, and it gets fed down here. And then it creates this, the stronger thread. So you want to see how it works?
Yeah.
I'm going to start it up. And a little bit loud. Here we go. If you just watch closely right here, that's what you can see.
What makes these others start? Or are they just slipping?
What makes them
This
start?
one started, it was going, then it was stopping.
Oh, well, that's probably why we're having trouble making it start there. But
okay.
yeah, because we're turning the power on, so it's powering all of them. They're just not hooked up. Yeah, so they're not. But yeah, currently the only ones that really work well are these ones. Because they have the rubber roller, which is leather. So we can set up all of those. But
Oh, that's pretty impressive.
yeah.
Ingenious.
Yeah. It's a pretty cool machine, and it starts to show you how the scale grows. And like you mentioned, this is tiny still compared to the other factories. So the other sites in our national park, they are the later version of the factory system. So we have Slatersville, that Sam Slater opens with his brother John, and that's kind of like the earlier version of the mill village. And then it kind of grows from there. So you have these huge factories. One thing to note is that in Rhode Island, it happens a little bit sooner, and we have the Rhode Island system, which was generally hiring full families. So you have usually the children and the mother working in the mill, and then the father might work on the farm. A lot of these mill villages, they have their own farm as well to help produce the food for the people. And so the father would work there. But basically the people that are working there, they're spending all their time, all their money in these factory villages. So they have a store, but it's owned by the company. The kids, they probably spend their time in the factory most of the week, 6 days a week. Then they go to Sunday school, and Sunday school is sponsored by the mill owners usually. And so it's great, it gives them a chance to learn to read and write. They're also learning the values that the mill owner wants them to have and how to behave properly. So it's more of there, it becomes more of a total control that the mill owner on the top really can exert his control everywhere. Whereas here, Sam Slater finds that he couldn't really do that because there already was a strong community here of skilled workers. And so that's really one of the reasons that he ends up leaving here too. That this was a great place to get started, but then that system expands and they move out to other areas in Rhode Island and Massachusetts. And then later on, there's places like Lowell, where there's people with a lot of money coming in, investing. They want people to come and work there, usually single people. That's what we think of with Lowell and Millville. They're having people come in, work a short period of time. They don't really think they're in it, not for a career, but they're going to work there and get married and then leave. But this was the beginning of that new system, that new way of life and looking at things that you're coming in, you're getting paid for a task, or getting paid for your time, not for the task. And that's why this building is so important. We see what physically happened in here and then how that just changed the lives all around.